What is up, you beautiful bastards? Welcome back to another week. This week we have an excellent guest in Stephanie Kirmer. But before we get into that, we have a fantastic episode where a dude goes to China and gets thrown in jail. He has no clue for how long, or essentially I guess he kind of knows what he did.
Yeah, he has an idea of what he did wrong. He just doesn't understand the implications of it.
Just imagine being in Chinese jail and not speaking Chinese.
Not just from Chinese jail. He's also from Atlanta.
Yeah.
It's like that's like as not China as it gets.
But the episode is about as crazy as you'd think it would be.
Yeah.
But to check that out, you got to go over and be part of the Bastard Society on Patreon. There's several tiers there, but go check it out. But back to Stephanie. Stephanie's an awesome guest. She goes on the whole AI thing, and she gets a little bit more into what we were kind of expecting with the Ike episode.
Yeah. Yeah, because as you found out with us, AI and machine learning is not an all-encompassing term.
No.
There's different branches of it, and it can get confusing and diluted, and I have no idea what's happening. But the one that we're interested in, the Skynet takeover type of AI and machine learning, that's what Stephanie Kirmer knows about. And she got her start in sociology. She was actually working in Detroit before she was working with AI and all that. But she has since moved on from sociology, where she can be more effective. And she currently works as a data scientist at Saturn Cloud.
She came up with some crazy shit throughout this episode, man. Like the Chicago stuff.
Yeah.
That blew my mind.
Stuff we would have never thought about. And it all kind of ties together. A lot of implications as far as what the machine learning can do, what they are doing with it, what it means for society as a whole. It's a hell of a thing.
If you're a guy like Gerry and you're afraid of people stealing your data, this is an episode to listen to. You might be more scared shitless when you're done, but this is one for you.
Yeah. So give it a listen. Let's go talk to her.
What is happening, you beautiful bastards? All right, Stephanie, thanks for joining us today.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
Now, you specialize in what seems like pretty much everything AI.
I've been a data scientist for about 7 years, but I have a sociology background and social scientist before that. Yep.
Now, what is it about the whole data scientist thing that has you worried about technology in people's hands?
I think it's not specific to AI, but that all technology in the wrong hands can be very dangerous. But AI is very powerful, so you get more danger in some ways from it. It's also misunderstood in a lot of areas of sort of public policy and the broader community. So it's easy to get sort of confused about what are the actual risks of AI and machine learning and data science and what are sort of misconceptions, which we can get into later as we chat more. But I think we have the ability to really shape the world around us in subtle and sort of invisible ways by using data science techniques and machine learning. I don't use the word AI too much because that has so many sort of connotations, but it's really the same stuff. We have the ability to shape the world around us in a lot of really sort of somewhat insidious ways by using these techniques. Adding one algorithm to an otherwise manual process. People don't realize that the algorithm interacts with the world around it. So when you tell the computer to find the thing in the pictures or to determine who's a high risk person, tell the algorithm to do these things, it is using history and existing information to make that happen. So if you're trying to, the example that we hear about a lot is bail algorithms, right? To get bail because you have been determined to not be high risk based on other people who previously did or didn't get bail. And it's using the history to predict your future behavior.
Mm-hmm.
But the problem is that history is not unbiased. That history is not, it's not objective. It's history is about, who got caught, who got, whose offenses were considered important enough to get in the system, who never got a chance to get bail, so we'll never know if they would have reoffended, so on and so forth.
Yeah.
So the idea is you're replicating our history by using these algorithms to sort of make decisions about the future. And we don't necessarily have the greatest history. We don't necessarily want to replicate that history.
Mm-hmm.
So
that was my first thought.
That I think is most, sort of clearly describes it. If you try to predict the future based on the past, you get more of the past.
That's a good point. So before we get into like the details of how that works, Griz and I were talking off the air, and we were kind of wondering, and this really ties right into that, with the current state of machine learning and society, which of these options do you think is most likely where we stand today? And that would be iRobot, Terminator, or The Matrix. Because it sounds like all three are right around the corner.
Well, see, I don't think that I'm trying to remember iRobot's plot. I don't know exactly.
It was just we all had
the robot
like
servants
basically pet robots.
develop. Yeah, they develop a bad attitude.
Minority Report maybe is more likely if you're going to go for one.
Oh, yeah.
But don't call me on that. Like, what do I know?
Oh, you heard it here first from Stephanie.
No, but I think that we're not going all in on, the technology is taking over everything all at once. It's small choices and small decisions and small steps in our otherwise, like I said, manual processes that get turned over to an algorithm little by little. And it seems very innocuous when you do it one little bit at a time. But then you realize that there's a cascade effect. If the algorithm is used to give you one piece of information, well, it might be interpreted as, does that actually mean also this and then also that? And people assume that the algorithms are smarter than they really are, and then make assumptions based on the results of those algorithms that will then get used for maybe
everything
less like sort of nice purposes. So that's why I say Minority Report. It's like the idea is if the algorithm can tell you one thing, that doesn't mean it can, then tell you, it can tell you A, but that doesn't necessarily mean B or C. But people will think it does, and then they will make decisions based on that, and then eventually,
Perfect example is the hiring algorithms everyone's using that they're now seeing are completely useless. Like they're pushing away perfectly good candidates for jobs because of an algorithm.
Right. And that's a perfectly good example, because how do you choose what the right candidate is to tell the algorithm to find the right candidate? You find it based on the person you hired last time, who was good, who turned out to be good. You don't use the person you never bothered to interview before because they had, a name that maybe wasn't familiar to you, or their, educational institution wasn't Ivy League or whatever. So that algorithm will find you more of the same, but that doesn't mean that more of the same is what you needed.
Right. That makes sense. That's kind of how we end up with a lot of this bias in bigger corporate jobs. Smaller companies aren't using these algorithms because they don't have that kind of volume. But then you end up with all these biases and unfair advantages for a specific group of people, regardless of what that group is, if that's what the algorithm is looking for.
And I wouldn't say that you can necessarily count on smaller organizations not using algorithms.
I would say they're using
that's
more.
A product you can sell. The algorithm that Big Corp uses to find the hottest candidates.
Right.
That's a product. You could sell that to the smaller company. They don't need to have the pool of candidates to train it themselves, because hey, someone's going to make money off of that.
Not to mention now smaller companies don't have the people or the time to look into people, so they just pay someone to do it for them.
Yeah, maybe that's true.
I wouldn't see any reason not to, I guess, on the part of the small organizations, other than the obvious reasons that nobody should, based on my perspective. But.
Right. And you say that machine learning. Well, I'll stick with that term for the time being. Machine learning is not as smart as people think it is. I think it's pretty sketchy myself. Griz and I are kind of like on the opposite side of the line here. He's very big on like smart technology in his house, and I'm totally against it. But
that's different from machine learning now. Like,
right. So these are all things we don't know what we're even talking about here.
Well, that's where you bring someone like me on. Yeah.
Gerry's under the belief that because of certain products he has, they don't have all of his information. When truth be told, in my mind, it doesn't matter if he has it or not. All of his information's out there.
I think that's probably true, honestly. I think that the information is out there. However, the smart home stuff is really different from a machine learning thing. I can explain sort of the difference.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Machine learning is basically the way that I've described this to like non-technical folks in my life is imagine if you had a library of all information from all of time and you were able to understand it all and keep it all in your head all at once. You were like, you've got all the information. You could probably pretty accurately predict the future in a lot of cases because you have all of the situations, all the scenarios that have ever happened. You know all the details. Mm-hmm. That's machine learning. Machine learning is the computer can keep it all in its head all at once. Mm-hmm. You tell it, I want to predict the next, step in this, series, or you want to predict which of these individuals is going to do the thing next or whatever. Mm-hmm. But automation of like, when you say, hey, Alexa, do the thing, it does the thing. It's not the same at all. The voice technology that you use to do that's machine learning. But yeah,
that's what I was telling Griz is the bad idea. Because I'm building an automation system for my house that's totally disconnected from the big tech companies. And he thinks I'm wasting my time because, well, they have it anyway. And I said, that's a good point. But if they're going to take more, I'm going to make them work for it. Where Griz just hands it to them.
They're still going to get it all.
They don't care, man. I mean, if it makes you feel better, go for it. But you are just dropping the bucket.
Yeah. So. Not to mention, at the same point, what do you have, Gerry, that they give a shit about?
The PIN code to my front door.
They don't care about that.
I don't think they do either. So your data is valuable in its ability to be consolidated with everyone else's data into a data set that then can be used as that like library to help you predict the future. Mm-hmm. But missing one person out of that data set ain't gonna make it a really less valuable data set.
They want your money, not your house.
Big numbers, yeah.
Oh, come on, guys. It's the principle that matters here. But
if it makes you feel better, go for it.
It does. I feel great about it.
Your time and your money, go for it. Yeah.
So
we use Siri here. So
see?
The big issue with the automation in the conversation Griz and I were having, like we said, is how they're farming the data, and they're doing that with machine learning. Yeah,
I mean, the farmed data is the fodder for machine learning.
Okay, so they're taking that data to feed the machine.
That's the raw material.
Okay,
and the different companies have different sort of policies about how they use that data, how they share that data and stuff like that. So certain companies will be more willing to, make that data set a product that is available, and some companies will keep that internally, but the internal keeping doesn't preclude them from using it for their own internal machine learning tasks usually. Like everybody's privacy policies and sort of stuff are different about these things. So I can't I'm not going to accuse anyone of selling your data on the black market. But
I'm all
but the concept is, once the piece of data that seems irrelevant, like what time you turn your lights on in the evening or something like that, is when combined with everyone else's data, allows creating a system that will intuit what time you get home, and then maybe what time an ad should be targeted to you because you got home at that time. And it learns the archetype of you, and then can use that for profit generating practices.
And that's kind of where it goes from a really convenient piece of technology to ethically pretty sus.
I mean, yeah, it depends a lot on the individual's sort of, I think, informed consent and such like that. But at the same time, it's very hard for average folks to be informed, consenting about things this complicated. And knowing, what I know about machine learning and the, sort of consolidation of data, it does, I mean, some of it is a little, does make you feel a little icky, but at the same time, we're trading that data for the ability to participate in our digital world. And you don't it's not really a choice in a lot of cases.
Well, that's my thing.
Go live in a cave.
Well,
Nobody's going to do that.
We did a test, I don't know, probably 2-3 years ago now, and it didn't matter. So it was basically whenever someone would have their phone out, we'd start saying Liberty Mutual, and they'd start getting the ads for Liberty Mutual just to mess with them. And so here's the thing: even if it's not, if he has his phone out and we start messing with him, it's not his choice, but it happens. Or if someone else says it, someone said chimney near my phone like a week ago, and now I have things for chimney cleaners. I don't care about chimney cleaners. Like it seems like they're getting lazier and lazier, and they just hear a keyword and they're shooting ads at me like crazy. That's the thing that's bugging me. Is just they're getting lazy with the code where they don't even care if you're really looking into it.
That is the kind of data science malpractice, honestly, because it's like when you bought, you bought a dustbuster on Amazon, and now you're getting ads for more dustbusters. Like, who the hell needs another dustbuster?
You need all of them.
As a data scientist, I look at that and I'm like, you could have done better with that, because what you could really do is say, okay, they bought a dustbuster. That means that they're interested in this kind of cleaning idea, but maybe they have a cat or a dog, and then you could cascade that and you combine that with the other data that you have about an individual, and you could, at the same time, then it's like, oh, that could be even creepier, but at least it would be less obnoxious. Maybe.
Yeah, a little more useful. It's a better trade-off than trying to sell me the same thing I just bought.
Good data scientists don't make that dustbuster mistake. The people who run the TikTok algorithm, they've got the data science down to an art. They really know what they're doing, because you get the TikTok feed, it learns so well that people are like weirded out by how well it gives them the next video that they're gonna watch. And no one's ever like, just because I did this thing, it thought that. The TikTok algorithm is a really good example.
Is that just saying something nice about China?
No, China.
I beg your pardon. Sorry.
Go ahead, Griz.
I was saying, does that say something about China and their algorithms? Does China own TikTok?
Well, the
people
company who own TikTok are based in China. Like, I don't know a lot about the Chinese internal like machine learning, like
they got the algorithms
industry. I think it's good.
Yeah,
is my understanding, but I just, as a person who uses TikTok and enjoys it, like. And I've read about what little there is to find out about it. They've got it figured out. They do a really good job. They have incredibly precise data about how you interact with every TikTok video, like exactly what second you bumped it to the next, what second you hit the like button, what second you paused or whatever, and like what was on screen at that time, and exactly what that was, how that relates to other videos around. So like the content is very, very atomized, so they know exactly, as far as they can tell at least, why you liked it and why you moved on and so on, and that's what feeds the algorithm.
And as a data scientist yourself, you're totally fine with using things that like TikTok, that are basically treating you as like, I don't know, the
source,
the product, I guess.
Yeah, you know what, I feel like it would be awfully hypocritical for me to be in this role and in this job and not be okay with that to some degree. Like and you're always going to have to consider for yourself what the trade-off is. What am I losing by them having this information? What, like, so they know I like watching people, boop the noses of the otters at the zoo. Okay. That's fine. I can, and it's not one of those things where you can just sort of, live in blissful ignorance when you know exactly how it all works and what's going on. But it's kind of just part of the modern world in which we live. Yeah. And I wish I had a better answer than that. Just if I'm willing to use other people's data to solve problems and to go out there and work for businesses, it's just
my question whenever anyone's like Gerry and they're worried about what devices are hearing or taking or information they're taking from them. What do you have that you're hiding? Right? Like, are you working against the government? Because otherwise they really don't give a shit about you. You're like you said, a drop in the ocean. You are nothing. Unless you're conspiring for something, they don't care. All they want is your money.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's largely true. I think that the the better way to ensure that things are not misused is to maybe work through the public policy angles rather
Mm-hmm.
than to try to withhold your personal data, because that's just not going to keep back the tide. If they're GDPR and regulations like that, companies really do pay attention to those and really do care about not violating major legislation about data privacy and what can be used and what can't, and how it can be used.
Mm-hmm.
But they don't care about your individual personal protest on these things, unless it's a like I say, a legislative, major, like going to cost them real company money, like real corporate money, not just like slap on the wrist money.
Right.
Yeah, that's my experience from working in data oriented companies for quite a while. Like when it comes down to, oh, are we going to actually be in violation of GDPR if we implement this feature that would be using their data this way? That's when they back off. So,
Well,
Jeff Bezos isn't going to show up to your door, Gerry.
I just wanted to point out that you guys are both making me feel significantly less special than I did 10 minutes ago.
Yes.
But that's fine. I can live with that.
Just as special as the rest of us.
So considering, you're using all the products and you're comfortable with it, where do you actually draw the line? Is that something that you do professionally? It's not really an issue in your personal life?
Well, I care. I'm very much more careful in my professional life of what I will do and won't do in terms of models I won't build, or things I won't use as far as personal data, or I've worked in organizations where my most of the data that I used was about hardware. So like industrial data science, predicting, the train's going to break down or something like that. But I've also worked in data science where I was working with data that was about individual human beings, so customers of corporations. And in the second case, I, as a sociologist, being, first a sociologist and second a data scientist, I come into the room and I'm like, do we have authorization to use this data from the people who this data belong to? And I really get, testy about that kind of thing when building a model. So, determining, okay, these customers are more likely to want the luxury product rather than the budget version, because those customers who will buy luxury are the customers that corporations like to market to and cater to, and be, they want to know who those people are. If we don't have the data and we haven't gotten the reasonably informed consent from people to use the data in that way, that's one where I'll say we just can't do that, because it's not cool. There are a line of data scientists behind me, unfortunately, who have never taken sociology classes and would do that.
Is there anyone else that would stop them?
That's kind of where my ethics sort of draw the line. Is like, there are things that it's, if this individual would not, is not authorized just to use this data for purposes of, say, marketing, then that's just not a thing we should do, and I'm gonna stick to that. But
now, is there anyone else that would be like willing to stop that, or is it just basically on the data scientist?
Most of the time, I think in the business world, that's on the data scientist to sit down and say. The compliance officer oftentimes will also be a person who's like, but if we use the data like that, then laws will happen to us, and that's also a potential area. But frequently, my experience has been upper level, like sort of business minded folks will,
they don't care,
not cross their minds that there's actually an ethical implication to it. And I think that there's actually ethical implications in almost all data science in some way. Like the locomotive is going to break down. The way that you design that model, you could create a situation where the mechanics are spending more time climbing around in dusty, hot, gross, dangerous places to fix the locomotive, but they might find a lot of false alarms. False alarms could be actually increasing the danger to the mechanic in those cases, right? But if you don't, if you have too many failures get under the wire, if it's say the radar system on the locomotive, that could create the increased risk of collisions because the radar is used to prevent collisions on track. So there are trade-offs that cascade down to human lives in almost any data science approach that you could sort of name, any application. So you have to think about them all, and that makes it a difficult job if you actually take the time to think about it.
Yeah, there's a lot of details to consider and implications. Now, as you're talking, I found myself kind of a little bit confused as to what exactly a data scientist does. Are you creating these algorithms? Is that part of what your job is?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So a data scientist is a very wide-ranging job title these days. It's getting bigger all the time, but they're also
that's kind of why I wasn't sure.
Yeah. So a data scientist is differentiated from, say, a data analyst or data engineer in a few different ways. A data analyst, you would expect them to just sort of get tables of data that's organized in sort of, rows and columns, and then build, dashboards or visuals or, or sort of analytic stuff. A data scientist, you should theoretically be able to give them the messiest, gnarliest data that you've got coming from whatever data sources. They can clean it up, put it all together, make it orderly, and then use what we call predictive analytics or machine learning to use that data to say predict. If you give all the data about home sales, they should be able to build you an algorithm that will predict the price of the next house coming down the line. Or you give them data about all the customers, they'll be able to predict to you which of these customers is more likely to buy luxury in the future, or so on. So that algorithm step, the predictive modeling or predictive analytics or machine learning step, is sort of the purview of the data scientist. And then you have other adjacent roles. So say machine learning engineer is the person who takes that algorithm that you've created and then makes it fast and makes it able to run in your other, computer context so that you can, hit it to get the prediction for the next guy who comes along, and next guy comes along, next guy comes along. The engineer might be the person who's making sure the data moves fast enough to get into this process so that you can then get the results out. There's lots of roles in this space that are kind of all connected, but the data scientist is the person who takes the data and builds the algorithm that's going to predict the next step.
Now, your worry with all of this is basically who's getting mostly, it seems like, is who's getting put on a watch list for things they haven't done.
I care about that because I worked in social policy and in criminal justice in Chicago, and using machine learning for some of those tasks. So I've kind of seen it. Right. If you're familiar with the city of Chicago has what's called the SSL, the Selected Subjects List. It's using people's past interaction with the criminal justice system, whether it's as a victim or as a perpetrator or as an arrestee or whatever, using records from the Chicago Police Department to then identify people who are considered high risk for involvement in the criminal justice system again in the future. So that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be an offender. That means they might be a victim. But this algorithm was created by a number of people at the Illinois Institute for Technology. So it's another university in Chicago, not the one I worked at the University of Chicago, but another university in the area that built this and worked. The process was, unfortunately, create this algorithm that will predict someone's going to be involved in criminal justice system, got kind of warped and used for targeting people. The theory was, the ideal, the hope was it would be used to target people for social services and intervention, but it was really used by the police department to target people in the way that exactly the way you think that they're targeting people.
So that does sound a lot like Minority Report.
Yeah.
So I think they've stopped using it, or at least they say they stopped using it.
I would say it sounds pretty sketchy.
Yeah.
But it was, when I worked at Chicago in, gosh, how long ago? 5 years ago, longer. It was a place and being used, and there have been some media exposures of this thing that have caused obvious public outcry, but the process when I was at the University of Chicago was, can we build a better one? Not can we change the idea of this,
or not use it at all.
Yeah. Huh.
I feel like they're always going to be pushing for that, though. They're always going to be trying to find some better way to, just dig in. And I imagine Chicago's not the only place that has something like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, the thing is, that was a publicly, university academic built version that was built for the Chicago, sort of municipal government. But the better, sort of better in air quotes, approach has been for private industry to try to build equivalent models and algorithms and then sell that as a product, because there's a lot of money to be made in that, because small towns or medium-sized towns or don't have necessarily access to the academic institutions for this sort of thing. And so there's an obvious sort of business angle in it. And I would say that we're more likely to see more of that going forward. I mean, there's already a couple of companies that sort of sell something similar to that. But I would say you're more likely to get that. And then I think, FOIA requests are going to be less useful when trying to find out, what does this algorithm actually do? What is it actually using to build these predictions that someone's going to be, an offender or a victim or something like that? Because when we were working on algorithms like this in academia, all of that information was relatively transparent. We tried to make it transparent, not using people's race or things like that. But if it's a private corporation, those windows are closed to seeing what's really underneath, and that's extra scary.
But I mean, once they were on this list, were they just being watched more? Were they under surveillance?
So the understanding that I have, and this is just from my consumption of news media, I don't have any firsthand knowledge of any of this, just to be clear, was that if those individuals were pulled over at traffic stops, they were more likely to be brought in for minor traffic offenses because they were perceived to be more at risk of offending in some other way. That's one thing that I heard. I also know that there were programs trying to reach out to individuals who were high scorers on this list for social service interventions. I just think that the proportions were off in those.
I was gonna say, it still sounds so sketchy, because if they just like you were saying with Minority Report, if they haven't committed a crime, I mean, you rolled through a stop sign.
They may have known someone who committed a crime or been, arrested previously, but not convicted, things like that. They may have been a victim in the past, and that could also but there were things around sort of social networks of individuals. So if you were
associated with,
and so and so else was also arrested at the same time, then you're connected in this social, sort of web. And then if that person was arrested with this person who's very high scoring, that could cascade back to you.
Yeah, that's some sketchy Big Brother shit. That's that. Yeah, no thanks.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I don't do this work anymore. I felt very bad.
I'm curious that they're allowed to even attempt to do that. It just seems like they're infringing on so much.
All information that is the property of the police department. Yeah. So that information, if the police department decides that that's how they want to, use it, you don't get a lot of say in that.
Yeah.
And then one of the key elements of that is certain neighborhoods, certain parts of the city, certain parts of any city are more policed than others. You're more likely to get arrested for
especially in Chicago,
bogus thing. So people who are in the system are more likely to be parts of those communities and maybe not others. And you get where I'm going.
Now,
I'll find the article about this because it's there's some interesting journalism about this specifically.
We'd love to read that. Now, kind of taking into consideration your experiences with this, is that what pushed you in the different direction with your career? Why you don't do that now?
Yeah, honestly, it really is a lot of it. Also, I feel like the career opportunities for me and the opportunities to do more sort of interesting work in more sophisticated technology were not there in academia. Academic data science is honestly kind of behind the times in a lot of areas. I mean, it was I'm sure things have progressed, but I don't have a PhD. And so I was not in line for, moving up the latter in an academic setting. Didn't feel like I needed a PhD, so I didn't want to go that way. So going into industry has been the way that I've been able to, get, further in my career and learn new things and continue to grow professionally. So I think that's all there. But I also was very disillusioned by some of the work that was being done and the applications of machine learning that were in place. Like, and academics do great stuff a lot of the time. There's a lot of really exciting and not ethically questionable machine learning in academic settings. So I don't want to diss on everyone in that space. But for me, I felt better about what I do every day in the industry space, and I've been rewarded and recognized better for it. So
yeah, I think I would probably struggle a little bit too with just dealing with information for people, especially when it affected them so directly. And then you get into start talking about pre-crime and things like that. But I actually saw a headline, I'm sure you guys saw it too, about Facebook's algorithm issue they had recently. Have you guys seen that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Where the algorithm misclassified, I don't know if it was one black man or a group of them, as an ape. Which
it's not the first time that's happened.
Right. That's the first time I read that headline. Because I didn't really track it before. I don't have social media outside of the show, so it's not really something I ever gave a lot of thought to.
Yeah. But now Facebook's been caught for this before.
I think Facebook is probably like the poster child of abusing the algorithms.
Yeah.
Have you ever?
Now a robot will show up on Gerry's door.
I know some wonderful people who do work at Facebook, but it's not for me.
Have you ever had conversations with them about the stuff going on behind closed doors there? You probably can't even say that, can you?
I don't think that they would be at liberty to say if I was to ask.
We did have a whistleblower from Facebook that contacted us and wanted to get on the show, but it was very, very difficult to make any time to get them on. That would have been an interesting one.
Yeah. That's I think that's like I said, the prime example of the ethical implications and what can happen when you really don't think about them. But I don't think, even going into this episode, I realized just how pervasive machine learning was. So is it kind of like, even if I don't have like a cell phone or anything, can I even avoid it in any case in the United States, for example?
Well, I mean, most purchases or transactions you make with, a digital, a credit card or something like that are going to get in some way brought into a machine learning technique, because that's a lot of the transactions and purchase data, for example, for fraud detection. Like your credit card purchases are going through some sort of system to determine that they are or not fraudulent. So you're going to get, the data is getting used for that. There may be, if you make online purchases, there's certainly a lot of machine learning applied to things like that too.
Gerry,
what else?
Where do you grocery shop?
Let's see, Costco, Aldi's.
Okay, you have a membership to those. Guess what? There's all your data.
And even if you don't, your purchases still might go into a broader pool of data about what people buy from us. Even if they don't know that it's you, they still might find it valuable to know this is what goes into the cart of a person who, you buy, these kind of chips. What else does a person who buys these kind of chips buy? And it's all going to be in the same transaction. So it's obviously one person buying it. They don't necessarily care that it's you. They care that it's a person who has certain characteristics that can be generalized about.
And I guarantee that, especially like if you look at a grocery store, when you're going through a line, they got video of you. They're probably saying, yep, average height, white male is doing this. Looks like he's a father of children. Like everything you do, whatever you have, they're still looking at you, man.
I would say that it's unlikely that they're connecting the video or, any sort of image data about you to the purchase. Like those systems are usually probably separate, but you never know about the future too.
Nope.
Well, I can understand, the store wanting to track what products get sold. That makes sense. That's really how they decide what to put back on the shelf, especially because, from region to region, that's not always the same thing. If you've traveled for, any great amount of distance between two places, the same store won't always have the same things. So I can be fine with that. I can live with that information. But I still take issue with, the whole personal data that's being taken in. I think probably I have a bad taste in my mouth about it because of Facebook and, really social media in general.
Mhm.
And I was curious to know what is your take on like the way that social media in general is using it. We already know Facebook sucks, but everybody else is using similar algorithms.
Yeah, I mean, it's a strange thing, right? Because using social media is probably not good for us. We kind of, it's research to suggest that it's not a healthy thing for our mental health, at least, to be using social media as much as we do, or perhaps at all. But we still do, and it's sort of there's an interesting conversation to be had about the effect on our brains of constant stream of sort of information coming in there. But then the second half of that is then what data are we actually leaving behind in those breadcrumbs by our interaction with the systems, and what effect does that have on the rest of the society? That's kind of the way that I like to think about these things. Is my usage of this giving data to a system that's going to then have a negative impact on the world? And I think Facebook probably does. I think that's what I would say. I don't necessarily know that that's true about it before. Yeah, so I don't know if I necessarily think that's true of all social media. And there, if you sit right down and think about it, like using social media, is my usage of this going to have a negative impact on others, cascading down by the fact that my data is in there? Then it's a very unpleasant, hard thing to think about, because there's a very real possibility. I'm not so much concerned about me individually as an individual user of this product being negatively impacted, as I am worried about my actions having a negative cascade effect on others. This is how I tend to approach these things.
But on that note, if other than just answer your question not using it,
but it's
it kind of does actually, and that's actually an angle I hadn't really considered before. Obviously, for like the fake news thing, we know that's really bad for society, but the idea of your information being put into this system having a negative net output on society, it's not an idea that I'd heard before, and I think it's a good way to sum up how you're looking at it.
Yeah. I think that's my more serious concern, because I can consent to having my data be used for this and that and the other, or that having ads placed in my feed that are supposedly gonna be targeted to me. But if a model gets built because I gave data to this company, and then that model is used to feed radicalize the youth or something, that scares me. That part makes me worried. So using a social media product where I absolutely don't trust that there's anyone internally making the ethical, like, wait, no, let's not do this. Yeah, that's kind of where I have to go wrong.
But so on that note, though,
not that I necessarily always abide by that, but I really like if I sit down and really think about it, that's what I would say.
But on that note, if you, other than just basically living off the grid and disconnecting completely, how can you control that?
Can't. That's I think trying to, like I said, the public policy angle does come back around. If we have incentives set up for large organizations and corporations that they know that illicit behavior or damaging behavior will cost more than they're willing to pay, in PR or money, whatever, maybe executives in jail or something, then we can drive the actions of those corporations that way. I don't think my individual behavior in using this app or not using this app can really make that impact. But advocating for sensible policy approaches to monitoring and to oversight of social media and of tech corporations, I think that's our best chance of actually making sure that these are not a net negative impact on our society. I know that a lot of that doesn't seem very plausible in the current moment. We got to figure out ways to push our representatives in that direction. But in the meantime, if I have absolutely no faith that a company would make the right decision in a challenging situation, then I try not to use that product.
Which most of them, in my mind, aren't gonna. They're just gonna do whatever benefits them.
This is such a cheerful, uplifting episode of your show. I'm glad I've been able to be here and make everyone feel better.
It's just, listen, our listeners love learning about this kind of stuff. So, I mean, some of our episodes that are not cheerful and technical as hell, they love. So,
okay, good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They also like us shitting on Gerry. So,
if I had a single like good answer to which tech should you use and which should you not use, and like what's the if I had that answer, I would have written a book by now, and I would be like way out. Yeah, but I don't have a good single answer.
They're all businesses. They're all run by people who want to get more rich.
But then that means look at the incentive structure. Look at where they're really motivated, because it's not by you holding up your little flag. It's more what's going to cost more than they're willing to pay. What's going to actually drive them to at least lip service, if not real change.
Well,
regulation.
So Griz and I both, we love science and for the most part, technology. I just have a little bit of distrust here, but
I have distrust too. I just know the problems.
Is it possible to kind of have a positive impact if, let's say, I decided to become a data scientist and go to school for that? Kind of the way you are. You're not doing things that don't sit right with you, which is a good choice in my opinion. So I guess, can anybody just kind of do the same thing, collectively start building on both ends, policy and go behind the scenes and make better choices with the companies?
Yeah, in theory, yeah. I think coming into the space of the profession of data science, a lot of times the decisions are made not out of malice but out of ignorance, and the bad decisions about building an algorithm using data in a way that wasn't intended or in a way that's not consented to by the proprietor of the data, the creator of the data as a person.
Yeah,
those decisions frequently, if you come back and say, well, in reality, think about if it was you and your data was used in this way, would you feel okay about that? Or if it was your child or something like that, coming at and like bringing that perspective of thoughtfulness to the room makes a huge difference. And I mean, if I could be in all of those rooms and make that difference in all of those rooms, I would, but I'm only one person. I can only work at one company at a time. So you're looking for voices with a perspective that comes, with ethical concerns and with thoughtful balancing of the business need, which is not, which is what you're there for. You're paid to solve a business problem, but balancing that with, what if this got out? What would people say? What would the PR look like if this got out? And as well as, what if it was you? What if it was your kid?
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of ways to move a company to make a decision that's within, good ethical, guidelines that also can solve the business problem. There's never just one way to solve a business problem with data. But there are often better ways in terms of, I say, what if this got out? What if this was you? What if you had to answer to Congress about this, etc.?
Are there a lot of people like you doing data science work? Because you seem kind of like, so I do know some people that do like programming and other data science type work like that. They are not as socially conscious as you. This might be a generalization, but they just seem to get hyped up about the technology and don't think about the implications.
I mean, I get also very nerdy about the tech, but it is very uncommon for people to come from social science into the data science space, in my experience. At least people that I know are mostly from engineering, math, physics, stats, and so on. So STEM fields. There are certainly some programs and maybe a growing number of those educational programs in higher ed that are trying to incorporate some technology ethics or stuff like that into the broader curriculum of those degrees. But it's not going to be like the people who have a sociology masters that go into data science, not very many of us.
Mm-mm.
And I think that's too bad, but I also think that it's a very, it's a different skill set. My career changer midstream. I didn't go from sociology straight to data science. It didn't work like that. So
Right.
It's not something that everyone can, just breeze through and do. I think having, I'm a big advocate for college, and higher education should prepare you first and foremost to be a good, informed, thoughtful citizen, and then to get a job. Like the job part should be second to the participant in a community of individual humans in a broader society part. But that's kind of a luxury for me to be able to say that in some ways, because a lot of people just need a job. So if you incorporate that into the degree programs for STEM, you can build people who have both the technical skills and the thoughtful approach to what really is important in human interactions and in society, and in the ethics associated with that. But you have to do it. You have to choose to do it as a community. So
I like that outlook. And actually, I think that the college system in general is missing that attitude where, like you said, it could be just because it's a bit of a luxury for you in this situation, but most people just appear to be going to college thinking, I have to get this degree to get the highest paying job possible. They don't really think about becoming a better citizen in the society that they live, which is a great angle to be in. I didn't finish going to college. I stopped because I reached a point in my career where I just didn't need to go anymore. So it didn't make sense to spend the money on it. But my son, he is big into computers. He's only 10, but he's talking about getting into things that would really be in computer science, data science, and programming, things like that. And so he's one of these people that gets hyped up about the technology, and he's obviously too young to think about the ethics. And he'll get all crazy about something he has an idea on here, or something that he finds, and it just seems like a terrible idea. But a lot of these things he's finding are already implemented. So he's telling me about something like, I don't know any details on anything right now, but let's say it takes your data that whatever you're doing on a computer and sells it to China so that they can make an app to sell you something. Yes, that's business, but that seems like a really bad idea. You know what I mean?
Yeah. He's not too young to learn about ethics, though. He's 10, he's learned to share.
I try to teach him. I try to teach him about the ethics.
You can bring that to these conversations, though.
Oh,
and say, it's not easy to go for, the pipeline of data to China in the background and talk about the ethics of that. But think about human, consent. Everybody should know about consent in all forms, and this is just another part of that. And I think you can insert those little nuggets that will make him a more thoughtful data scientist.
That's what I've been trying to do, but people his age, they tend to not think about those without someone saying, hey, don't forget to think about that.
Yeah, but having those conversations, he starts to think about it. And those conversations we need to have more and more, especially these days when people are forgetting about that stuff all the more.
Yeah,
we do. We need more of you, I guess.
Well, thank you. That's very kind. No, I was also wanted to shout out that I besides being a sociologist, I got a second degree in education. I went back to school for a master's in education for no reason other than I was interested. I thought maybe I might become a teacher, but that was just not for me. No. But the DePaul University College of Education has an amazing program in critical theory of education. This is not critical race theory, this is a different thing. But this is a theory of studying why we educate, what education means, what it's for, and what we should expect out of it, and what we should put into it. And my ideas about how education should make us a better citizen and what we should expect to come out of that besides just a paycheck. A lot of that I credit to my time at DePaul's College of Education, because they know their shit.
Actually, I forgot to ask you at the beginning. I should have done this way at the beginning. We kind of know a little bit about your history. What is it? What kind of things are you working on right now? What's big in your life right now that you're trying to get going?
So I currently work at Saturn Cloud, which is a company that builds a software platform for data science practice. So what we do is we have sort of a whole toolkit for small companies, medium companies that don't necessarily want to build out the infrastructure for a whole data science team. They don't necessarily have 10 data scientists, 20 data scientists, or a bunch of engineers and everything doing this stuff. And they would just like, sort of a turnkey option where you log in, you can write your code, and you can make a little, deploy your code to, share it with others and that kind of thing. So I work in this as a, combination sort of solutions engineering developer advocate role. So I help other data scientists learn how to use the tool and how to expand their, computation power with using GPUs and cluster computing and things like that. So that's that's my day job, and I do that, and then I do a lot of just public speaking and community sort of involvement around data science and practice of data science. I sometimes give talks that are more in the sort of sociology bent. I write a lot of blog posts and things like that about data science practice. I wrote a blog post recently why your data scientist doesn't need a PhD in math, and things of that nature, that I try to mix up the technical nerding out, which is really one of my greatest loves, with also bringing the social perspective to the broader community. I help, mentoring other data scientists who are younger, coming up in the field, particularly like women or non-binary folks and things like that. So,
now, is data science super math heavy? Because my experience with computers and coding is just like, I can work with Linux in the terminal and do the stuff that I need to do there, but that's about it. And I don't see any math there for the most part.
Well, so data science is a lot more about understanding the underlying statistical properties of the data that you have, because building the algorithm to get from this is the data to a quality prediction of what the next step or the next event might be requires not just, writing the code. Writing code is obviously important. We all as data scientists have to be proficient in Python or something of that nature. But it also involves investigating the data, understanding what kind of distributions we're seeing here, what kind of correlations between the things in the data exist, all of the different methodologies for what a kind of algorithm you might want to be designing, or what really fits your data, or what's going to help you get, a useful result. Monitoring your algorithms for their ongoing performance and things like that. So there's actually quite a bit of math under the hood. That is my least sort of powerful skill set in terms of my data science practice, because I got through trigonometry and statistics, and that was it. I never took calc, and I kind of now wish I had, because it does come up from time to time and I have to sort of self-educate. But knowing what it means when the data looks like this or looks like that, and what you should how you should accommodate certain properties of the data, that is pretty important to the job. But also coding, and also a lot of other crazy skill sets around business communication and stuff like that, because you have to then be able to explain all this crap to somebody else
who doesn't understand the rest of it.
Yeah, I can totally appreciate the whole self-taught thing, especially with calculus. That's really how I learned everything I do on a computer. I'm not very good at it. Definitely above average, though. You had mentioned a minute ago, you're talking about kind of advocating for women and non-binary people. That kind of triggered a thought in my head here about the people that we've had on the show. I think, Griz, maybe I'm just misremembering this. I think most of the women, most of the people that have been on to talk about technology were women so far, right? Because initially it was a lot of men, and then we were like, we haven't heard from any women.
I would say it's a mix.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like it might be growing. How's the outlook right now from your perspective?
I mean, in data science, we're maybe 20% women.
Yeah.
I'm usually the only woman on data science teams that I've worked on in the past, but now I have my boss is female, and it's actually, I think, looking better. I think things are moving forward. I think there's still so it's part of the hiring problem and the sort of issues in that space that I would say that still kind of maybe are an issue, where we as you know, and this is rehashing some of the stuff in my blog post about why your data scientist doesn't need a PhD. But the image of a data scientist, an appropriate data scientist for non-practitioners, or even sometimes some of the people actually in the field who are hiring a data scientist, can be very biased. They think, well, a person with a PhD in STEM, the person who has been a data scientist already for X number of years, the person who has worked in highfalutin deep learning code technologies, blah, blah, blah. That those sort of boundaries, the sort of you're setting around what the shape of a data scientist looks like, tend to enclose a lot more men. That there's degrees in STEM are women are making progress. It's also a problem in terms of the racial and ethnic diversity as well in the field. Whereas some of these qualifications that people who aren't really familiar with what the job entails might set are unwittingly creating homogeneity of the pool of candidates. There's no reason that you need a PhD to do the job. It's just an easy check off, well, we can weed out all of this group because they don't have one.
Yeah.
But that means you're disproportionately weeding out women, people of color, things like that.
Yeah, this comes right back around to what we was talking about at the beginning, where Griz brought up that article he had read about the, I guess, heavily biased hiring algorithms.
Yeah.
We internally in our heads kind of already use algorithms to make decisions. We're using heuristics, right? We're making up little rules in our own heads about, well, I think that the data scientist needs to be blah, so I'm going to make that rule blah, and then I'm going to weed out the people. That's almost what an algorithm really is, So we would the algorithm, a computer-based algorithm, be worse? Maybe not. Sometimes it would be maybe the same as what we are previously creating in our own heads that's also biased.
I watched a guy deny someone at one point because they put in their application at 1 a.m. And I was like, you have no clue what their life is. What does that have to do with anything?
No weird rule. That could have been the greatest candidate. They could have.
I don't even think it was a rule. I think they were just weeding them out. They were just like, yep, get rid of it, They were trying to make it easier on themselves. But,
and I think that's an unfortunate but a normal human thing. I'm busy. I don't have time to read all these resumes. I'll just read these.
But 1 a.m, gone.
Think about it. You're making a big mistake by doing that.
Yeah.
But I think that's also one of the problems in data science. There's a lot of women coming up in education in this field. Like data science, the phrase data science did not exist yet when I was in college and grad school. So I'm old in this field as compared to the people who are joining the discipline now. And now I think more women are learning about this work and are coming into the field, but they need to be given the opportunities once they get out of school to actually get in the door. And that first job is a huge, sort of jump for, once you've been a data scientist for somebody, a lot of other people will say, well, you must be able to be a data scientist because clearly someone else said you were, so now you are. So
yeah, and again, that gets into what companies are looking for their applicants needs to change a little bit. They need to be more willing to take in people who might not be perfect and see how they go.
They need to know what the job is. They need to know what the skills actually need to be and be open to a diverse perspective on how you could demonstrate you have those skills. And I've pushed for this in companies that I've worked at when we were doing hiring. Okay, what you want them to have a PhD or whatever. You want them to have already been a data scientist somewhere. Okay, why? What is it that they're supposed to have gotten from that they need for this job? Number one. And that they can only demonstrate by having done it over there or having this degree. Really? You really only need, you want someone who knows how to write academic papers describing new and novel algorithms. What job is it you're hiring for again? Are they going to be writing papers about new and novel algorithms? Because I don't, but and that's kind of the way to go about it.
Yeah, we're kind of at a point now with, especially with hiring people who are, we'll call them non-traditional based on what these people are looking for. We're going up against a sociological evolution of how we got to where we are. And we're seemingly at a point now where that's no longer working. And I'm actually okay with the change. My daughter is also developing an interest in computer science. She's only 6, so it's a little early to tell, but
there's a book of machine learning for kids or deep learning for kids. I forget now. I'll get you the page for the book because it's cute.
Yeah, I'll check it out. I actually was talking to both of them recently. Asked them if they wanted to learn how to do some of that stuff. Because my son, he's always doing all the admin terminals and stuff on his games. He won't just play it. He has to get behind the scenes. And my daughter's trying to do the same thing. So I like the direction that things are going anyway.
Good. Yeah.
But anyway.
I really enjoy working with, fresh out of college or career changers or people who are sort of getting into the field. Because there's, like any field, any profession, there's unwritten rules. There's stuff you're supposed to know. There's stuff that people say is important, but really isn't important. And like helping people weed through that, I think is, I think it's an important responsibility for anyone who's senior in their field, whether just by age or by actual experience. And showing people the ropes so that it's not so mysterious, I think is valuable.
Agreed. We do appreciate you being on and talking about all this information.
Thank you for having me. It's been really fun.
Like I said at the beginning, I think a lot of people have a lot of misconceptions, and maybe some of them have been cleared up now. But if they want to find out more, where can they check out information coming from what you're working on?
StephanieKirmer.com.
That's easy.
I got all my stuff up there.
All right, we'll post that up too.
Why your data scientist doesn't need a PhD? It's linked there. It's on my Medium blog, but it's linked from the website. So StephanieKirmer.com.
All right, we'll link that to the episode as well, so you guys can check it out, because we really just scratched the surface here. There's way more involved.